Hello and welcome to this hopefully brief video about Show Don't Tell, adapted from a blog post by Brooke Vitale, a very experienced and well-respected writer who you could learn a great deal from if you were to search for her online. First of all, what does Show Don't Tell mean? Well, Show Don't Tell is an immersive method of writing in which characters and story are related using sensory details and actions. The point of showing is to pull the reader into a story by engaging all 5 of their senses. So that's including smell, touch, taste, and so on. Showing allows a reader to feel like they are in the moment and in the room with the characters, rather than simply a bystander observing the story from a distance. Let's look at some examples. Example number 1. If we were to tell, we might say, James stormed out of the room. If we want to show, that could become, "That's it," James shouted. Standing, he shoved his chair in, its legs scraping against the yellowed linoleum flooring with a shriek that made me wince. Behind me, the door slammed, a splinter of wood falling to the ground from the impact. Now that's so much better. And here's a pro tip from Brooke. See how much more detailed the show example is. From this, we understand that James was angry and stormed out, but we also get a sense of setting. Yellowed linoleum tells us that this is an old room, most likely a kitchen. The scraping of the chair is a visceral sound that we can almost hear, onomatopoeia if you like, and we can imagine how hard the door must have been slammed to make the door frame break. Yeah? Notice as well the repetition of the S sounds and these powerful verbs. Shoved, scraping, shriek, slammed, splinter. Okay, this isn't accident. This is planned, crafted sentences. And I just like that yellowed linoleum for the feel of it all. What are the connotations of an old yellowed linoleum floor? Here's another example. Telling. She had been crying. Well, we don't know who she was, but we know she'd been crying. Showing, that could become, her eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. Dried streaks ran down her face, leaving discoloured patches on her makeup. Wow. Let's explore that a little bit more. Here, we don't need to be told directly that the girl was crying. By showing us how she looks, we can infer that the girl has been crying. The same can be done through the actions. We don't need to be told a character is cold. We can see them shiver, see them pull their jacket tighter, or see them rub their hands for warmth. All 3 are more interesting and engaging than simply saying, he was cold. That's showing. Now, why does this matter? Well, telling is boring. It's straightforward and does nothing but give us the facts. There is no emotion behind it. Showing, on the other hand, makes a reader feel what is going on. It gives the reader a sense of character and of setting. It is compelling, and that makes a reader want to keep turning the page. Showing is also a great way to further character development. Instead of simply telling us how a character acts, we can see, and infer, who they are from their actions. Look again at that example from above. "That's it," James shouted. Standing, he shoved his chair in, its legs scraping the yellowed linoleum flooring with a shriek that made me wince. Behind me, the door slammed, a splinter of wood falling to the ground from the impact. Again, at no point do we need to be told that James is angry. We get it from the context of the scene, from his actions. We infer that. And all of this matters because, as writers, we want readers to care about our characters. We want them to be invested in our stories, and that starts with pulling a reader in and letting them get to know our characters as intimately as possible. So, here are 5 tips to show, don't tell, specifically looking at that involvement, that getting us to know the characters. And it starts with the use of internal thoughts. One of the best ways to show rather than tell is to get us into a character's head. Let the reader see what they are thinking and how they feel about a situation at the rawest emotional level, rather than just leaving it as something like, she was sad. Telling, Alice cried as she watched her mother leave. Yeah, okay, she was sad. Showing, Alice sunk to the ground. How? How could she just leave? The tears streamed down her face, but she hardly noticed them. Her eyes were focused on the door, waiting. Please, please, just open. Number 2, similar to using internal thoughts, we can use dialogue. In the same way that internal thoughts let a reader get into the protagonist's head, or the antagonist for that matter, dialogue allows a reader to understand what the other characters are thinking. Use your dialogue to show a character's emotion. While using said is often the best option when it comes to dialogue tags, there is a time and a place for louder dialogue tags, often when you need to show a particularly emotional scene. So the tell example might say, she laughed. Showing, with that use of dialogue, and then he went. Maria shook her head, her laughter so hard she couldn't get the words out. Holding up her hand, she tried to catch her breath. He went head over heels over the chair, she howled, clutching her sides. Okay, number 3, we can use strong verbs. In fact, there are some there. Remember that the simplest verbs are also the most boring. So use stronger words. Did a character walk, or did they stomp, storm, or prance? Did they cry, or did they whimper, sob, or howl? In the previous example, there was howling. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of the use of strong verbs. Jemima closed her briefcase and smiled. Yeah, okay, that's telling. Jemima snapped her briefcase shut and flashed a predatory smile showing immaculate white teeth. Now, immaculate white teeth, like that yellow linoleum, adds a detail which tells us more about what's going on. What can we infer about Jemima? I'll leave you to answer that one, but I think I know who Jemima is. Nelson crossed the street and went into a coffee shop. Okay, that's telling. Straightforward, that's what he did. Showing, Nelson danced right across the street and through the open door of a coffee shop. Okay, what can we infer about Nelson? Again, I think I have some kind of idea about his character, his personality, who Nelson is. Number 4, we can create a sense of setting. In a picture book, art tells the story as much as the text, but in a longer novel, the author has to paint the picture, obviously using their words. A tell example. The walls were cream. A show example. The walls were painted eggshell, with cracks running down them that made it apparent that no one had thought about this room in ages. On the ceiling, a water spot seemed to grow with every minute. Would you like to be in that room? Can you imagine being in that room? A tell example. Something was burning. I tried to open the window, but it was stuck. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad writing. But smoke poured from the oven and the acrid scent of burnt meatloaf filled my nostrils. I tried to open the window, but years of caked-on paint had made it impossible to budge. Much more like the climax of a story, or at least the rising action. It's so much more involved. There's much more happening there, and it's much more interesting. Tip number 5, and the last one. Do try to include sensory details. And this is something we've been working on a lot. The point of showing is to draw the reader in, to make them feel that they are a part of the scene and not an outside observer. And being part of a scene means employing our 5 sentences, so give the reader something to grasp onto. The room smelt funny. Okay, we're talking about sensory details, but we're still telling. The room smelled of spices, cardamom and saffron and paprika, and something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Can you imagine being there? Can you guess what that last smell might be? By digging deeper into the specifics, the reader is invited to use their senses to visualise the room, making for a more immersive and emotional reaction to the scene. Now, we don't always have to do this. So when is it okay to tell? Well, not every word in a book needs to utilise show, don't tell. There are times when, as an author, you want to get through something quickly. Moments that progress the plot, but aren't pivotal to the story. If they aren't emotionally charged moments, or if the setting doesn't matter, then by all means, tell the reader what's happening. However, a word of warning for GCSE students, in your short piece of creative writing, you're probably not going to have many of these moments. Let's have a look at an example. Susie grabbed her keys and ran out of the door. If she didn't get to work on time, she was going to be late. Here, we don't need to see what Susie's keys feel like or what the room she's in looks like. The point is she's in a rush, and that's enough. Another one. John hurried through security and down to the boarding gate. Showing his ticket, he made his way down to the jet bridge to his seat. Again. The fact that he's boarding a plane isn't necessarily important. Where he's going probably is, but the specific details of getting onto the plane can be glossed over. We don't need to know what colour the walls were or what the plane smelt like, unless that invokes some bigger memory or thought. However, do note that both these examples do use interesting verbs though. Sorry for the typo. The first example used grabbed, she grabbed her keys, and the second one used hurried. John hurried through security, instead of got and walked or more common verbs. A final thought. Remember, when it comes to writing, there is always a place for telling. But if you want to keep a reader interested, show, don't tell. Draw your reader in and then hold their attention by immersing them in the world you've created as thoroughly as possible. Allow them to imagine themselves there, to connect with your characters, to experience something rather than learn about it. Your storytelling will be that much richer for it. Good luck.